3, 2.
The internet is no longer dying.
Hello, welcome back to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. Sean is with me. Greetings, Sean.
Hello, my friend.
Let's continue our discussion of the original Star Wars radio drama. In our last show, we covered the creators, production, and cast. Now we will talk about the story as it unfolded over 13 episodes in 1981. The first episode opened with an advertisement for the Imperial Space Academy. Luke is listening to this advertisement, which is on a data tape, and a friend, Wendy, sees that Luke's listening to the tape, to the advertisement, and dreaming of the Academy, and makes fun of him, and so on and so forth. And then the two hop in Luke's Sky Hopper and head over to Anchorhead. We meet Fixer and Cammy. Fixer's grouchy. Wendy immediately squeals on Luke for the Academy data tape. Dreams of something bigger, something beyond Tatooine. Everyone piles on Luke for his ambition. Fixer claims that on these mandatory exams, he wrote his name and left and brags about it. And of course, we hear about Biggs, the best, having left Tatooine. And Fixer is obviously sensitive about Biggs. Biggs was smarter, more ambitious, better racer, and he managed to get off Tatooine, and I think that riled Fixer. Fixer is a townie for sure.
Except for a few panels in the Marvel Comics from 77, this is all new to us, Star Wars fans. This is not something that we saw in the original or subsequent theatrical releases of Star Wars. Ultimately, it was added as a cutscene many, many, many years later on one of the editions that was released. I believe it was the Blu-ray set. First of all, Luke is, when we see him in the film, he's just this farm kid. He's, I don't want to say naive, but he's, very used to farm life, and he knows a few things about a few things, and he has some aspirations to get off the planet. Typical story, right? Small town, some kids go off to college, things change. You start to dream a little, but you're stuck down on the farm. But this is a much more developed view of that problem that Luke has, and there is a deeper conversation about it later amongst the characters. But I mean, he's basically abused by everybody. These people are supposed to be his friends, but not one of them really addresses him in a polite or nice way or a friendly way. Fixer refers to him as Wormy. I mean, that's his nickname for Luke. And everybody makes fun of him because he has aspirations to go to the Academy and he wants to leave. And it's not a positive thing. It's become very toxic, this relationship that he has with these people. And it doesn't surprise me that Wendy sold him out, because it's just more fodder for them to rip on him. And it's the analogy of the crabs in the bucket, right? So Luke is the crab that's trying to crawl out of the bucket, and all the other crabs are just pulling him back in. And you don't need a lid on that bucket when you've got Cammy and Fixer and Wendy and friends to keep you down on the farm. So it's a more elaborate or a deeper look at what of the state that we find Luke in the films. So I found it interesting. I mean, the characters, the portrayal of these characters was a little over the top, and Fixer feels like a character from Welcome Back, Carter, that Queensy, Bronxy, New York kind of accent. And he's like, "Oh yeah, give me the juice. I want some of that juice." Felt a little bit out of place, but and then of course Wendy is a very excitable character. He's a little awkward and weird. But yeah, I mean, this is, again, it elaborates on stuff we kind of knew, but it gives you more look into the psychology of Luke Skywalker. I mean, he's really pining for the Academy. When we meet him there at the beginning, he's singing along with the theme music and the recruiting video. He's ready. I mean, he wants the uniform, and he wants to go, and he wants to be a part of all this Imperial stuff. I do have some questions about the Imperial Academy. It comes out more in the conversation with Biggs. And again, the people ripping on Luke and how, oh, you go to the Academy, you're going to get drafted into the Imperial Navy. I thought the Academy was for the Imperial Navy, exploration and medicine and all this other stuff, but it's like, it's all on a starship, right? So I thought the Imperial Starfleet was the Academy, but I guess we find out later there's kind of a slight distinction, kind of a merchant marine versus actual Navy kind of thing. But that also reminds me, there's a lot of very interesting naval references in the radio drama. Feels very old-timey, wooden ships, Iron Men versus starships and the Rebel Alliance, but we'll get to that.
I picked up on the old Navy vibe. Fixer announces that he'd like to do a speed run. We hear about some geographic features in Beggar's Canyon, the Stone Needle, and the Bottleneck, and these are obviously challenging areas for the Skyhoppers. Luke agrees to the challenge of the speed run and ultimately wins by threading the Stone Needle, which has only been done in the past by Biggs. And in doing it, Luke actually ends up setting the speed record for this course. When Luke wins, he thinks of Biggs. He's proud of his achievement. And again, we're establishing that all of the group, everyone in the group, whether they like Biggs or dislike Biggs, all of them have a grudging respect for him, what he'd been able to accomplish. Thoughts on the race?
This is all classic Lucas, really, when you think about it. Racing in cars and speed was all very important to Luke as a youth, until he almost killed himself in an old Fiat. But this, to me, feels like the pod race in episode 1. It's a little extra that isn't really necessary. It's establishing Luke, and his abilities as a pilot, and again his outsider stance with this group. I mean, early on in the conversation, when he's sort of arguing with Fixer, Fixer's like, "Oh yeah, you don't think I'm good like Biggs? Like I could beat you." And he's like, "All right, well let's race then." And so they race. But earlier on, he was telling Fixer, like, the fastest course time is because Biggs went through the needle, right? He threaded the Stone Needle. And if you want to have the fastest course time, you have to do it. So then Luke does it and beats him and sets the course record. So it's kind of like Fixer is not the sharpest tool in the shed, and the local bully, which bullies tend to not be, but whatever. It's more Lucas stuff. It's more racing. It's more Luke. In the movie, it's fine making the references. Hey, I used to fly this back home. I'm not such a bad pilot myself. They're constantly proving himself to others. Well, he spends a lot of time at the beginning of this, through most of it, trying to prove himself to a lot of people. But the race, again, a lot of shouting, a lot of sound effects. Felt overlong to me on the radio broadcast, just like the original podcast or pod racing scene in episode 1 went a little long. I mean, you can reference it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, like, for example, in the radio drama, there's a lot of stuff that people are starting to have conversations and they walk off set. Or at the beginning of the race, for example, Cammy's after Fixer because she doesn't want him to race. And she's like, "Oh, you're gonna hurt yourself. One of these days, somebody's gonna get hurt doing this." And they're kind of arguing as they go off set and they fade away. Well, you probably could have treated the pod race or the hopper race or whatever we're calling it this week. You could have treated that the same way. Could have had, okay, we're going to start off, they zip off and then come back later with, Luke, that was a great run, blah, blah, kind of thing. But whatever. It's a radio drama. It's a little different than what we come to expect, and we're going to talk a lot about stuff like that. So
Luke is thrilled and recalling Biggs, but no one congratulates Luke. Fixer is unhappy. He takes the loss personally. Windy says that he'll never race or ride with Luke. He was frightened by Luke's flying. The threading of the Stone Needle scared him. He'll find another ride home. So there's no celebration for Luke, no congratulations. Luke's thrilled. There's a little bit of foreshadowing. Luke Skyhopper experiences a stabilizer issue during the race. My mind went to the climax of the film, the Death Star attack, and Luke experiencing a stabilizer issue with his X-Wing. I thought that was great foreshadowing.
Yeah, it was. It's a way to establish a skill early on that comes back to help the character later. Makes it more believable. Absolutely.
Would you have liked to see the Skyhopper race in the film?
I don't know. I think that maybe, but not really. If you think about the movie and the way it opens, you have the crawl, and then you have the Tantive and the Devastator and the chase. And Vader boarding the ship, we get the ejection of the escape pods. I don't know if in the movie where you would put that race. Would you put it after the crawl? Would you put it after the ejection of the escape pod? That seems to me like it would break up the action, because we would forget. Of course, if it was Lucas and we had a full 35-minute Skyhopper race like we did in episode 1, you would forget the fact that Princess Leia is in danger and she's orbiting the planet, and we have all these unresolved issues that are going on. Same thing with I think it's the reason why they cut out the whole thing with him and Biggs talking, them looking up to the sky together to see the battle, and also I think it was a pacing issue. You would sort of lose the urgency of the beginning of the film if you threw it in there. And I don't know if you couldn't throw it in necessarily after, because that's weird, because Luke gets the robots and whatever and meets Ben. So I mean, it would be interesting to see it, but I don't know if it would do the movie any service by being inserted there at the beginning. The other thing is that in 1977, I'm pretty sure the special effects for that particular scene would not have been good, and probably, or they would have been great for 77, but they probably would not have held up over time. I'm kind of glad it's not in there, I guess. I don't know, it could be interesting. Maybe a special edition.
97?
It would have worked better. I mean, they would have had the technology. And maybe Lucas wouldn't have put so many lizards and weird things crawling across the screen in front of the characters, and maybe just would have focused on something else.
Ouch. We get a sense of Luke wasting time with his friends. We meet Uncle Owen. Uncle Owen wants gratitude for taking care of Luke. Beru points out that Luke never asks for anything, and he recently lost his best friend Biggs to the Academy. He needs his dreams, according to Aunt Beru. This opening conversation doesn't really expand at all on our impressions of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. I guess maybe I gain a measure of respect for Beru for sticking up for Luke and being insightful, really recognizing why Luke is struggling with the harvest and not being able to leave for the Academy and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is a moment there in the conversation between Owen and Beru when they're talking about the gratitude with Luke, where Beru kind of pushes back on Owen about, I'm stuck out here in the woods at your beck and call, and I've never asked for anything and all this. And she gives him some pushback, kind of like, hey, it's not just Luke you're taking advantage of here. It's like, I feel like hired help as well, is kind of the implied statement. But then, even then, he's all like, well, I'm going to go up and work on the South Ridge today, so I'll be back later. And she's like, fine, guess I'll have your dinner ready, jerk. So it is nice to see her stand up for him. I mean, it's obviously more forceful than what we get in the movie, but we do kind of see Aunt Beru as the one who really understands what's going on and the buffer between Luke and Owen. And I feel like Owen Lars in the radio broadcast is way more curmudgeonly and way more angry old man. Like in the film, he's just gruff and he's rough and he's a guy who makes a living with his hands, right? And he appreciates hard work, and that's kind of it. And this one, he's like, I'm going to put a whipping on you, and you better. And he kind of, even the voice of the guy, he's trying to I'm sure that the actor who played him, the voice actor who played him was an older person, but he even plays it like older. He's like, hey, you kids, and you get off my lawn. And it felt like they were really playing him as the angry old man in the episode. But yeah, he treats Luke like he's just one of the hired hands and whatever. And I give him food and water and a place to sleep. He should be thankful. Now get out there and fix those evaporators. It's a little rough, a little harsh. There's more of the similar conversations that we saw about waiting another season and all these things, and it's the putting off your dreams. But yeah, no, Bruce definitely has a firmer hand with Owen in the radio broadcast than she does in the film.
Uncle Owen, he's also miserly. I'm sure moisture farming on Tatooine didn't exactly bring in the credits, but clearly Owen's in a better financial situation than he lets on. He can't afford droids. He just chooses not to buy them. So he's working Luke very hard. We never really like Uncle Owen, but do we dislike Uncle Owen as a result of the radio drama?
Yeah, I would fall on the side of I dislike him more. He was a jerk in the movie, but he wasn't overplayed. He's a stern dad, right? Work first, play later. And that's how he comes across in the movie. And you're kind of like, well, that's a little, we don't like that, but we understand it. And so, he's just trying to make do with what he's got, whatever. In the film, he just comes across as like teenager doing teenager things, not understood by the older folks. In the radio drama, it's like Uncle Owen views Luke as get to work, shut up, eat your gruel, and don't complain because I do a lot for you, and don't be an ingrate because I'll sell you to the Jawas or whatever. He just comes across that way, like you're dead to me if you don't work.
A quick word about Luke's technical knowledge. The radio drama does an excellent job of making the Star Wars galaxy feel lived in, despite the lack of visuals where we can see weathering on the buildings and the ships, the wear and tear of everyday life in use. The radio drama compensates for the lack of visuals with greater technical depth. Luke's boosted a thrust sequence and the stabilizer, which I mentioned, and he's working on the evaporators, torquing junction plates and clamping leads. And it's not just Luke in the end. Obi-Wan has these skills. Han has these skills. Just a great way to use radio to establish the lived-in component of the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah, a lot of that exposition that we get from the characters describing what's going on, what I'm doing to correlate with the clanking or the beeping. Like you say, the mention of the various pieces and parts and technical things. It does go a long way to building the picture in your mind and giving you the Lucas feel of what's going on in the radio drama versus being able to see it in the movie.
So next, Luke sees the Tantive V4 being chased by the Devastator. As he's working on the evaporators, he uses his binoculars. Of course, he can't see that level of detail, but he recognizes there's a battle going on. He stops his work. He leaves the Treadwell droid with the evaporators, and he heads to Anchorhead. Uncle Owen's comment about wasting time with his friends. Luke's so excited he needs to share this with someone, but of course it's at the expense of the, I wouldn't say promises, but the commitment he made to Uncle Owen, his goals for Luke for the day. So off Luke goes. As soon as he arrives, the focus shifts from the space battle that he's observed, the thing he wanted to tell the crew about, to Biggs. Biggs is at Tashi Station, and he's come without advance notice. It's a surprise. He's going to be leaving the academy. He's earned third mate on a ship called the Rand Ecliptic. And back to your Merchant Marine comment, this is not an Imperial military vessel. This is maybe a cargo ship or a cruise ship. But anyway, Luke remembers the reason that he's come to Tashi Station. He's clearly reported false alarms in the past. The boy who cried wolf, everyone is skeptical. And when the binoculars come out again, no one sees a battle. And so once again, Luke looks like a fool, like a dreamer. If we didn't have the sense already through the way that the characters talked about Biggs, with Biggs present, it's obvious that he's the leader. He has the authority in the group.
The encounter with Biggs is a little convenient. I mean, it comes out, or it's implied in the conversation, that ultimately Biggs's goal was to see Luke before he went back to the Rand Ecliptic or wherever he was headed back to on the morning shuttle. It was just a lucky happenstance, I guess, that he showed up at the place where everybody was at. The way it works in my mind is Luke is way out on the back 40, and so Biggs lands wherever town is, what accounts for a town where these people hang out, and he winds up going there first and talking to them with the intent of probably bumming a ride from somebody out to the Lars homestead to see Luke. But it does feel convenient. But we're also establishing Luke through all these actions as he is the dreamer. He is I don't know if he has an overactive imagination or not, or if he just sees things when other people aren't around, but everybody kind of pokes him about the rebellion wouldn't come out here. Nobody goes to Tatooine. And then, Biggs also kind of shuts him down and shuts the group down, leave him alone. Like they refer to him again as Wormy a bunch of times, and as a loud wind or something, or a loud noise blowing through the place. Clearly, Luke, for whatever street cred he had for 3 to 6 minutes after winning the race, is completely gone. And Luke appears to be the only person on this planet looking up. Everybody else is looking down and just going about their daily business, which is sort of an interesting contrast, again, which establishes, not unlike Biggs before him, as someone who is thinking about the bigger picture and looking at life beyond the farm and beyond Tashi Station and beyond Beggar's Canyon and all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting scene, but it's another chance for us to show the townies piling on Luke. Luke is obviously very excited to see Biggs, and it's the friends are reunited, and it's like your friend who went off to college a year before you, and they come back in the summer and they tell you all the wild stories about what went on. Luke is wide-eyed. Oh, I can't wait to go. Can't wait to go. I'm going to go to the academy and all stuff. But yeah, with the space battle thing, it's funny. We were discussing some things before we started recording today. We were referencing the old Marvel comics about some of these scenes, because the Marvel comics were written and released before the movie came out, and they were written off of early drafts, and they included some of the cut scenes. And so the Cammy and Fixer appear in one panel in issue 1, and it's this scene where Luke rolls in and runs into Biggs, and they talk about the space battle for a minute. And I think Biggs is in like maybe 5 panels in the first issue, but it's the whole conversation that they have together. But yeah, Cammy, Fixer, Wendy's not even a thing. All these other people, like all these other interactions and references aren't even mentioned. So again, we were also talking about, how much of this is George and how much of it is the writer of the radio drama. And I don't know, I think a lot of this stuff is added by the authors of the drama versus Lucas, but we're really fleshing out Luke, his relationship to the planet Tatooine, his family, his friends, his situation, and his real burning desire to get out of Dodge.
Biggs wants to separate Luke from the group, wants to talk to Luke privately. So they take Luke's land speeder to Beggar's Canyon. Biggs explains that he'll be joining the Rebel Alliance. So he confesses this plot that he's involved in to jump off the Rand Ecliptic and join with the Rebel Alliance. Says he has some contacts, criticizes the group, tells Luke that he's better than the group, and he'll make it off Tatooine, and that's what's upsetting Fixer and the rest. When the subject of the Academy comes up, Luke repeats what he's heard from his uncle. He defends his aunt and uncle, says that they need him, and that he's committed for at least another season. And then Biggs tells a story about a friend at the Academy who was a rebel suspect and died during interrogation, and I think tries to create a sense of urgency for Luke. Like, he's confident that Luke will get off Tatooine if he goes soon, but worries that another season will turn into 2 seasons, will turn into 3 seasons, and Luke will never leave. So it ends with the 2 of them spotting sand people and banthas and having to get back in the land speeder and go back to Tashi Station. And it's a sad parting, because Luke has snapped at Biggs. Luke doesn't like Biggs pointing out obvious things. So it's interesting. Luke switches from the most enthusiastic guy about the Academy to a defender of his uncle. So the 2 then part. Thoughts on Luke and Biggs in Beggar's Canyon?
This is probably a byproduct of radio drama, and we don't get to see actions and facial expressions, so we have to be overly emotive with our voices. But the hysterical kind of laughing thing while they're both talking about the good old days of racing in Beggar's Canyon and stuff feels a little weird and forced. Generally, though, the conversation is interesting because this is a conversation that happens several times, actually, through the course of the radio drama, and it's something that we don't actually get to see in the film, which is characters have spent some time being introspective, and this introspection has led them to making certain decisions about their lives. And for Biggs and for Princess Leia later on, we find that this introspection has led them to join the rebellion, to stand up for the side of good in the galaxy. For lack of a better word, the murder of his friend at the Academy really clarified Biggs' mind that he was on the wrong side of history. Luke has been sitting at home with a propaganda recruiting tape on loop for 3 years, right? All he sees is the commercial. Be all you can be, right? He's not seeing the real picture. He doesn't understand. I mean, the Empire is not really a thing on his planet. And so he doesn't have any frame of reference other than the propaganda. And so now his best friend, whom he looks up to and is trying to emulate and live up to his reputation, has now come back and has sort of derailed his beliefs in the Academy. Like, he wants him to get to the Academy so he can get off the planet, get some skills, and then do something with himself and do good things in the universe. He knows that if he stays on Tatooine, it's a wasted life. But at the same time, he's giving him the warning, right? He's crossed over the horizon and returned with bad news. We look to the horizon for hope, and here comes Biggs. Oh, by the way, they're going to murder your friends at the academy. And so it's a difficult conversation for these two friends who have been separated for, I'm assuming, a period of time. They talk about accelerating the courses at the academy. It's unclear, but clearly they've been apart for a while because Luke makes the comment during this conversation. He's like, "You've changed, clearly changed. You're not the old Biggs I used to know who was very cavalier about life and used to race and thread the needle, and we used to all be about speed and fast cars. And now you're very serious and you have this moral center and you're trying to do good in the galaxy and fight the Empire." And it's confusing for Luke, and so they do have this sort of rough interaction. But at the end, they apologize to one another, and Biggs wants Luke to know, should something happen to him, that he died trying to do the right thing. And that makes Luke even more sad because they're best friends. He was hoping to see him at the academy. He was hoping to follow him into whatever service that they were going to go into. But ultimately, Biggs is like, "Listen, I got to do this. It's the right thing. I can't support this regime." And then he says to him, I'll be looking out for you, or I'll be watching out for you, or what is I believe the exact quote. The rebellion's kind of all over the place and in hiding, but I'll keep an eye out for you. I'll keep an eye out for you when you get to the academy. I'll have contacts. We'll figure something out. So it's a bittersweet parting. It didn't quite go. The reunion didn't quite go as well as probably either of them hoped. But there's a mutual understanding there and a respect. And the biggest part of that conversation is reminding Luke that there's more he can do with the skills and the talents that he has than just farming for water and racing the deadbeats in the canyon on the weekends. It is kind of weird after all of this we get early on where they're really trashing Luke, that he keeps referring to them as friends here and family here. It's like, no, you really just have some family and that's it. The core elements of this scene, the message of the conversation, the reminding of Luke that he needs to get off the planet, needs to be his own man, and then the conversation about what you may not know about the Empire, Luke, is that it's very bad and that people are dying, innocent people are dying, and that we need to stop it. Like, that conversation is, and the tone and the message there is great, and would have been something that probably wouldn't have been too bad to have in the original movie. Again, if you can plop it in the right spot and it doesn't take too long and doesn't kill the pace of the action. But I really like this little vignette here in the radio drama.
I agree that a few moments in the scene are overacted, but I gained greater appreciation for Mark Hamill's acting. His portrayal of wide-eyed teenage Luke, we hear him shifting through a greater range of emotions in the radio drama than the film, and I like it. I appreciate it. I have a better relationship with Luke. I feel more closely connected to the character, understanding his points of view, his conflict over leaving the only family he's ever known. So, closing thoughts.
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, it sets up the Tatooine side of the story fairly well. I mean, it introduces us to all the characters there, waiting obviously for the next round of drama to arrive on the planet. It feels like good Star Wars, right? It feels like we're getting, like you said, more Luke, or more about Luke, more understanding of him, kind of more understanding of his family situation, more understanding of the social structures of Tatooine, things like that. It's all good. It's all good prelude to introduce the Empire to Tatooine.
No one who's seen Star Wars expected the radio drama to open this way. The same can be said of Episode 2, which we're about to discuss. Did fans stick with it? I could see a lot of fans leaving after this episode because it didn't follow the film. So I wonder if this was the best plan in terms of listenership.
Remember, this is now out at or around the time of Empire Strikes Back. There is a global phenomenon at this point that is Star Wars. Giving people a rehash of something old probably wasn't the most appealing thing, right? Because you have the second movie that just come out, all this new stuff, new toys, new everything, comics, all stuff. Like there's new happening. And these guys are saying, hey, let's go back and revisit the first movie, giving the people who are Star Wars fans in the time, giving that fan base something familiar but different was probably a good idea when you think about it. I mean, we're talking about expanding characters and expanding backstories and giving you longer scenes, basically. The longer scenes of Mos Eisley and Tatooine and other things. And the running gunfight in the Death Star is much longer and there's much more conversation amongst all the characters. Things like that, right? So we're giving people something familiar, the battle on the Death Star, right? But we're also giving them something more, which is extended conversation and more character building and exposition on the world that we live in the galaxy of Star Wars. So I think starting off this way, I mean, they even start, there is no quote unquote crawl, right? There's no crawl on the radio, but there is the opening narrator. He doesn't even talk about the Death Star plans or any of that stuff. He talks about there is a revolution. It's not a rebellion. It's a revolution. And that it's happening far away. But here on Tatooine, people love and dream and die and struggle. But they have hopes too. The Empire will catch up to these folks. It always does, wink, wink. And then we go to the beginning where everybody's talking about the Jews. I don't know if it's a bad way to introduce this new radio drama. It's a different way to do it, but I think it's Lucas's challenge, which is how do you make Star Wars, the visual spectacle, a radio drama? But two, it's also how do you keep people from being bored with just a complete recitation of the original script? All of this expository stuff where we take a 2-hour movie and turn it into a 5-hour radio drama is an attempt to give the fans something new that they hadn't had before.
A new character, Lord Tyon. He's a task force leader on a planet called Raltier, which is being subjugated by the Empire. He talks about control of the population centers, search and interrogation. The Empire's constructed a surveillance system about to go live at the spaceport, listening devices. He talks about emergency powers invoked by the Emperor and the Empire's elimination of the High Council on Raltier, purification, impressment gangs, executions. Immediately establishes the Empire as the bad guys. Princess Leia finds herself on Raltier at the same time. Tyon refers to her as an angel of mercy, says that she's attractive and influential. And when we hear that Leia's on the planet and she's just arrived, Tyon's very happy to have an audience with her. When he meets her, he's incredibly condescending. He clearly doesn't respect women as equals. He's willing to use his position of influence for personal gain, so he's a bit corrupt. For example, Imperial law dictates that he search Leia's ship, but he offers to skip the search in return for dinner with Leia. We'll talk about the rebel attack in a moment, but your first impressions of Tyon.
Tyon is an interesting character. He's everything you said. He's reminds me of every corrupt Soviet official we've ever encountered. He's the KGB. He's the Stasi. He's the guy who makes you live in the cement apartment block with the listening devices while he has the fancy house. He's clearly ruthless. I mean, the use of the word purification, I mean, it immediately takes you to a place. And, but the way he talks about these things, I think this is where I feel like he's a fairly evil character. Even though first listen, you're like, okay, he's another guy. But if you listen to the way he's played, he's very matter of fact about all this. Eradicate them and put them in camps and burn down the city and all that. He's just like, yep. It's like he's going down a checklist. He's like, oh yeah, this is for Imperial planet cleansing. We round up the dissidents, we put them in the camps, we torture them to death, we listen to the remaining people to see if anyone else, if we missed anybody. We lock down the spaceport, we search everything coming and going, and we train guns on everyone. Check, check, check. Great, I can go home now. Kind of thing. It's like he doesn't have any emotion about it. He's not angry about it. Yeah, he's not angry about the rebellion. It's very matter of fact. These people are rebel sympathizers, therefore they must be liquidated. That's what the Empire wants. That's what I do. And they 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. And I think he also has a little bit of insecurity when it comes to dealing with Princess Leia. But he's definitely into her. And he's clearly had conversations with her father in the past about coming to Alderaan. But yeah, you're right with the corruption piece about, I won't have to follow any of those rules if we have dinner. You're in the middle of a planetary occupation, like the guns are going off around you, the war hasn't ended yet, and you're like, oh, we can forego that. Let's go back to my club and have a steak. It's an eerie calm about his character, that he's on one hand managing the oppression of a planet while trying to get a dinner date at the same time. And so it makes him a compelling character, and he's someone that I would have loved to have seen at some point in the Star Wars cinematic universe, because he's Tarkin's apprentice, for lack of a better term, right? He's the young Tarkin. Tarkin's like, well, you prefer a military target named a system. Well, I'm going to blow up your home planet anyway, and then I'm going to go get lunch, and then we're going to execute you, and then I'm going to get probably tea. It's like that's kind of how Tarkin works, and that's the way Tyon works too. And so, again, he's a compelling character. He's very interesting, and he fits into this mold of that. This is not something I think that Lucas particularly tried to create in his presentation in the film, but all the Imperial officers and the real bad guys all have English accents, and there's this feudal structure in Star Wars, princess and lord and the emperor, and like all, there's a very sort of medieval caste system kind of on some of these planets, and these things are explored more, of course, in other media. His attitudes fit very well. Just a real kind of cold detachment.
Tyon would have been a great character for live action, and who knows, at some future point we might encounter him.
Yeah, that would be huge. Pulling someone who is part of the radio drama, someone created for this, and have them again. The Disney and Lucasfilm have reached into a lot of the expanded universe and brought characters and even creatures and planets. I mean, you name it. They brought them all in through Clone Wars, some of it, but Rebels for sure, The Mandalorian, The Bad Batch. It would be cool to see Tyon show up maybe in the Kenobi series. I would love to see them pull some stuff out of the radio drama and throw it in there just for grins.
A rebel attack on the southern frontier lures Tyon away from the area. The attack turns out to be a diversion. The rebels on Raltier are making contact with Leia. A wounded rebel is at the spaceport. Some strange things here. So, information that he wants to share with Leia, he's received under hypnotic imprint. What is hypnotic imprint? Don't know. The information is stored in his brain. The surveillance system that was about to go live goes live. So Leia and Antilles, Captain Antilles, hide the wounded man in the land speeder. They need to get him away from the spaceport. But Leia will encounter Darth Vader.
Leia arrives on the planet. She's trying to smuggle military-grade power supplies and medical supplies and all stuff right to these people. And she's hiding behind this diplomatic thing, and she's saying it's a mercy mission, medical relief. And she finds out they also dissolve the government and the ruling council, and these are the people that she had been working with. So now she's stuck there on a platform. She's been ordered to not leave the planet until her ship is inspected. She's sitting on some questionable material. Anyone who's got half a military mind could probably look at the stuff that's in her ship and figure out, okay, you're running guns for the rebellion, basically. This rebel guy shows up to tell her about the Death Star. But he has all this psychobabble about hypnotic imprint and how am I supposed to get the information out of your hypnotic imprint? Do I have to hypnotize you again? How does this work? Like you said, it's very confusing. And then he kind of croaks off and they throw him in the speeder to try and get him back to the ship so they can help him. He's groaning and grunting or whatever, and they kind of throw him in the back seat. And Vader shows up so they can't really get him on board. It's never really clear to me, I guess, why do we have to kill all these rebel fighters at the south end of the airstrip or whatever so this guy could sneak over and tell you the story. And Why was he wounded? I don't know. I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Ultimately, all of this is played out later on in the radio drama, but Leia gets all of this information basically from Tyon. I guess maybe his point is to inform them of the planetary observation system, because that comes into play very shortly after the Vader conversation. But really, the wounded rebel guy doesn't really serve any purpose. Now they got to hide this wounded dude in their car when Vader shows up. So he represents a very big liability to Princess Leia and her mission, really, by trying to just talk to her about hypnotic imprints, which is, again, like you say, I have no idea what that is. I don't even know where to start.
But the thought of it's fantastic. 2 scenes from now, we will learn through Leia's father, Prester, he was informing them about an Imperial project, Grand Moff Tarkin supervising. It is an ultimate weapon, codenamed Death Star. But your point, when we hear Tyon talking about the surveillance system, he's talking to a colleague, not Leia. So the wounded rebel makes Leia aware of the surveillance system, and then she does something very clever with that information after she speaks to Vader. We'll get there in a moment. Vader and Leia meeting before the encounter on the Tantive V4. Interesting. Do you get the sense that Leia has encountered Vader before? Think about that answer in a moment. But there's verbal sparring between the two. Vader hints at Leia's continuing appearances around rebel activity, wonders aloud why the rebels would throw lives away on the southern frontier. He's referring to the diversion, so clearly he knows it's a diversionary attack, but he doesn't know why. And I guess this is his way of letting Leia know that he's on to her without insulting her as a member of galactic royalty. He cannot accuse her without evidence. But hey, this game that you're playing, I suspect you. Leia falls back on the legal authority of Tyon. It's strange, and this comes up over and over again. I mentioned Vader being more procedural. I'm more likely to follow rules in the radio drama than the film, and this is an example. Tyon doesn't outrank Vader, and yet he has authority. This Raltier is his sphere of influence, and Vader is like a visiting contractor in a way. So Leia's going to hide behind the law, the minutia maybe, the fine print, and keep Vader at bay. Vader is called away, so the encounter ends. Leia then executes a plan involving the surveillance system. She knows that the Imperials are listening, and so she baits Tyon by calling him attractive, but saying he's too forward. So she's giving him hope that there is the possibility of a relationship, which is what he wants. She's going to try to use him to gain information for the Rebel Alliance, which she'll do in the following scene. But Leia in the radio drama has more agency than Leia in the film. And that's not to say Leia in the film lacked agency. She had plenty. She was the driving force of the rebellion that we experience in the film. And here, she's even more clever and more involved. So adding depth to this character. Love the way she turned the surveillance system against the Imperials. Thoughts on Vader and Leia?
So this whole thing is interesting. And again, it gives more backstory. And then there's backstory to the backstory that we get. Clearly, Vader and Leia, at the minimum, know each other by reputation. Because Vader's like, oh, once again, here we are at some rebel uprising or some kind of rebel trouble, and here you are with your ship full of, and he's air quoting, medical supplies, right? And she also refers to it herself later on in, when she's having a conversation with her father, where, well, everybody in the galaxy knows that I bounce around in your diplomatic ship and I'm always being a do-gooder and food for the homeless or whatever. Like, she's always doing stuff, and she has this reputation. That's why he refers to her as the angel or whatever, that is bringing relief, or at least I think Tyon calls her that. But anyway, so she has this reputation of being a, UN type person who shows up with aid and help. And Vader knows that. He also has a reputation, the right hand of the Emperor, and he does a lot of the bad things in the universe at the Emperor's request, and he oversees a lot of the bad things. And it's interesting because he's arriving on this planet, and Yeah, Tyon is the operational commander in the theater of combat, and he's showing up. He's like the CIA. He rolls up after the fact, and he's like, "Where are the prisoners at? It's time for an interrogation, people." Like he's there. He's okay. I'm going to the camp. I need to get up and talk to Tyon because we have interrogations to do, my friend, and that's his thing. And so while Vader is a military commander, and as we see that by the time of Return of the Jedi, I mean he's in charge of massive fleets and huge armies and practically the Death Star 2 at that point. While he could land on this planet and say, I am in charge now, right? He doesn't need to do that because he has field commanders that, at least in the moment, he feels are capable of handling the situation. So he's there to do a certain thing. And it involves torture, interrogation, brutalizing the populace, and finding out more about the rebellion. This is not the first planet that they've subjugated, I'm pretty sure. And so Vader, unless things go bad, of course, but he doesn't need to take over the day-to-day operations of the fight. But like you say, he's doing it in a very tactful way because not only is she a member of royalty for a prominent planet in the Empire that's well respected, she's also a member of the elected government. So even though it's now the Empire, and even though the Emperor has, control of pretty much everything, there is the semblance, at least until later when the Emperor dissolves the Senate, but there's still a semblance of civilian control and civilian participation in the Imperial government. And so Vader is playing that game because she represents the governing body of the Empire, for lack, even if it's only symbolically, she represents the governing body, and so therefore she's technically his boss. You don't see generals, you don't see the Joint Chief, of the armed services going and lecturing Congress on stuff. They're usually called before Congress and lectured. Vader might be the Secretary of Defense or whatever for the Empire, but he still has to get called before the Senate Appropriations Committee and tell him how he's spending the money. This relationship that they have is a game of cat and mouse, right? He knows she's an insurgent and fighting against the government, but she has multiple layers of legal protection, being a member of a royal house and influential that way, also being an elected representative in the Imperial Senate. But again, he's just reaching over the wall enough to tap her and go, I know what you're up to, and I'm going to catch you one of these days. And one of these days I'm going to show up to like my 5th or 6th or 7th planet that I've subjugated, and you're magically going to be here, and then I'm just going to have probable cause. Right? But again, I don't know if they've personally met up to this point, but they definitely know each other by reputation.
And there's a fear factor for Leia, but she doesn't show it. And there's a respect factor for Vader in dealing with her. So interesting interaction. I like it. The next scene brings us to Alderaan, and we meet Prester, not Bail Organa, Leia's father. They have a servant on Alderaan, a servant for the royal household or the castle or the mansion, Tarek, the feudal structure of the galaxy that's coming through in the radio drama. We have the lords and the ladies, we have the knights, and we have some artisans and servants and serfs. Leia expresses a clear desire to fight the Empire, but Prester talks about violence and warfare almost destroying Alderaan in the past. He specifically mentions the Clone Wars, and Prester asks Leia, are you ready to kill? He references the wounded rebel. The Empire's created an ultimate weapon called the Death Star. Then things get a little weird because Prester is willing to use the attraction of Tyon to his daughter to gain information. And he hints at Leia's feelings. I guess the implication is she finds Tyon attractive. This is all going to become clear in the following scene at a dinner party. What say you about this conversation between father and adopted daughter?
Well, first of all, he's not my Prester. Okay, he's Bail. He's Jimmy Smits, and he'll always be Jimmy Smits.
And so it is.
And so it is. No, sorry. No, so I did not catch on to the Prester piece. I suppose you and I could probably record an entire show on how to pronounce the Tantive 4. That's not how we say it in my house. No, yeah. So I did not realize that it was Prester, I apologize. I will refer to him going forward as Prestor, Lord of Alderaan. Yeah, the conversation again. It's this feudal stuff. We have I don't know if he's the manservant to Prester or if he's the head of household who runs the castle or whatever. There's some questioning about why Leia didn't show up to the house right away after she landed. Again, we have another one of these conversations by one of the main characters about soul searching. Leia says, no, I needed some time to think about stuff with Vader and Tyon last week that really got to me, whatever. And then the conversation about whether or not she's ready to give the full measure to fight the Empire. And it's in a broader conversation again about, Alderaan and Alderaanian culture. There's a lot of repetition of this fact that they don't have weapons, which of course is, a one-liner that Leia gives us in the film, when Tarkin is threatening to blow up Alderaan, she says, we're a peaceful planet, we have no weapons. But this is something that comes up regularly in conversation in the radio drama. I think that if the way I heard the conversation between Prester and Leia is he's invited Tyon to the planet or hasn't invited Tyon. Tyon has basically told him he's coming, but it's in answer to a long-standing invitation that he's had that he can come to Alderaan anytime and hang out and relax. Leia mentions the whole thing about, or it comes up in the conversation about what she said on the planet being overheard by Tyon about how she thought he was handsome or whatnot. But she says, oh, Father, it was a ruse. And then after she says that, he's like, I know the way you feel about this guy. You don't like him. You're not attracted to him. He's garbage. We don't want him in our house. But it is a very medieval move for a ruling king or baron or whatever to dangle his eligible daughter out for nobles or other powerful people to make alliances with. It does you kind of cringe at it a little bit because you're not really sure if he's doing it as bait to get the guy there so they can look through his pockets for any important information, or is he really trying to kind of put her out there? This is me asking for more dialogue in a 5-hour radio drama, but maybe a little more dialogue around that might have helped. But no, again, it's an interesting scene. They kind of set up the plot, like, let's get him on the planet. Let's find out what he knows about the Death Star and see where it goes from there.
Prester and Leia will host Tyon at a private dinner party, just the three of them. And Tyon is bragging about torching a group of rebels who ask to parley. And this is a funny story. He's chuckling while he's telling it. He's brought a sidearm, very convenient, based on what happens next. Some of the comments he makes to Leia, again, he's so condescending. He says, you lead such a sheltered life and you couldn't be expected to appreciate a soldier and outdoorsman's thinking. This guy is Imperial trash. He's everything that the Empire stands for and nothing that Alderaan stands for. So now we transition into discussions of marriage, and Leia is baiting Tyon quite easily. She asks flat out, what are you offering? And then Tyon goes into his resume. He's a nobleman from a lesser house, but soon a new project will change his status and he's going to win an exalted rank. Leia responds by calling him an errand boy for Tarkin. She's very forward. This is very transactional on her end, and I don't think Tyon's picking up on the vibe. In any case, Tyon continues to run his mouth to impress her, says that the next convoy from Governor Tarkin's headquarters will transfer plans to the Imperial vaults. Ultimately, Leia's use of the codename Death Star, when Tyon didn't use the codename Death Star, exposes her as a rebel. Tyon reacts fiercely. He's going to take Prester and Leia into custody. There's a wrestling match. Tyon drawing his blaster, Leia resisting. A shot rings out, screaming, and then there's a break between the scenes.
The dinner party is my second favorite creepy moment in the radio drama. This scene goes from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away to a country in Central Europe. This is really like a very medieval feudal transaction. I'll give you all the land beyond the river to the sea if you enforce the king's will, like that kind of stuff. Tyon is establishing an early bid as suitor. He's coming in with, well, I might not be the front runner now, but I'm involved in these Imperial projects with Tarkin and the Emperor, and soon I will be one of the highest ranking individuals in the Empire, and then clearly my suit will be worthy. He doesn't have an advantage. He's coming in from a position of not weakness per se, but he definitely knows he's not top shelf. And I kind of mentioned this earlier when Tyon first is introduced, and there's this conversation about the law and the rules and her being a diplomat and all these things, and him not really being able to navigate all the legalities of that, and then of course falling to his own hubris and just forget the rules, let's have dinner. So he's coming into this with a little bit of insecurity. This is his shot. He's trying to get into this royal house, which is up until later in the dinner party is clearly respected in the Empire. Clearly they have status, because he refers to himself as being in a minor house. So I'm pretty sure that in his worldview, even as an Imperial technocrat jerk, he still understands that his bloodline or his birthright is somewhere down the ladder from Alderaan. I feel like Princess Leia gave away her hand in this. The whole idea of this dinner party, just the three of them, no servants, no house staff, no other dignitaries, no other guests, was to lure Tyon into a sense of comfort and security, thinking that nobody would overhear him talking. So Leia's role should have been a little bit more reserved in this process, but the fight at the end, which the way the actress who portrays Leia in the radio drama, the way she goes about this particular scene, you don't know if it's Prester who's killed or Tyon who's killed. I will say though that the intro portion, the conversation that they have, where he's laughing about locking dissidents in a building and burning it down, shows one, that he's incredibly tone deaf, and two, that he really is kind of a sadist and really sick. I think it shows a difference between the people of Alderaan and their culture versus maybe the rest of the universe. But the fact that he's explaining to them that, well, I don't mind getting a little blood on my hands.
One of my favorite lines, as Tyon is bragging about the new project, Leia asks, "What is the project?" He says it's classified, and she says, "We'll come back when it's not classified." Again, the transactional nature of the conversation, but yeah, I really like her in this scene. She's strong. Tyon, though he is of lesser status, is used to being in charge and expects to be in charge around women. And obviously that's not the case with Leia. She's more than his equal. All right, so a few seconds pass. We're wondering who absorbed the blaster shot. Turns out it's Tyon. Surprise, surprise. So Prester and Leia have survived, and not only survived, but they've taken the information from Tyon at the dinner party, and they've used it to engineer a rebel victory in a space battle. The Rebel Alliance ambushes the convoy that Tyon mentioned, Tarkin's convoy, and they've captured the Death Star plans, though they've suffered heavy casualties. That amounts to over 100 lives. It comes up later in the conversation. They agree to take Tyon's body to the Southern Game Preserve, and they'll arrange a hunting mishap. Now it's necessary for someone to go to the Taprora system, and the rebels there will transmit the plans. The Tantive 4 will be the ship to make the mission. Prester wants to do it. Leia begs him for the opportunity to do it. Prester agrees, he gives in, and then Prester reveals a secret second part of the mission. He mentions General Kenobi, General and Jedi Knight. He will give the coordinates to Leia, and it will be Leia's job to convince Kenobi to join the Alliance. Prester says that because of Kenobi, Alderaan survived the Clone Wars. Again, this is a story that I'm unfamiliar with, so are you aware of any fighting taking place on Alderaan during the Clone Wars, and any role that Kenobi played in saving the planet?
That would be a negative. I don't. Maybe in some obscure novel or comic book in the EU, there might be some mention of that. But the cinematic canon that we have, including the Clone Wars cartoon, episodes 2 and 3, which is basically the bookends to the Clone Wars, and even in the first couple of episodes of the Bad Batch, we have no reference to Alderaan ever being caught up in any of the fighting. I mean, it's a core world. It's very close to Coruscant, and even though Coruscant was under attack, it was the capital. This is something that we've heard all throughout the refrain all throughout all of the media is that Alderaan is a peaceful planet. They're basically pacifists. Even Tyon talks about how they're a culture in pursuit of art and beauty. New material that has been introduced in the Star Wars universe through the radio drama. For a planet that doesn't have any hunting whatsoever, they're going to arrange a hunting accident for Tyon. So that's going to take some explaining. There is that conversation between Prester and Leia about who goes on the ship. Again, this does to me feel like it fits nicely and dovetails into the moment that we meet Princess Leia and the moment we see them pulling into space around Tatooine and being attacked by the Devastators. The hologram in the movie, she says, my mission to bring you to Alderaan has failed. So this is perfect setup for all that. And at this moment, we've completely decanonized Rogue One, or Rogue One has completely decanonized the radio drama. I'm not sure yet, but we're in a very weird space now because we're starting to overwrite things or rewrite or rediscover things that have been overwritten, I should say. That's the better way, because I'm listening to this for the first time after seeing Rogue One, but a lot of people listened to it before Rogue One. So this is the problem with what that we've discussed with the hierarchy of canon and what is more important.
We end with Prester agreeing to let Leia go and mentioning Kenobi, and that's it. Then we get the transition music, and
then it's episode 3.
Then we start episode 3 with C-3PO and R2-D2 on board the Tantive V4.
Okay, so we finished episode 2 basically.
Yeah, so we finished it exactly.
I don't care. I'm having a blast, dude. I'm loving this. This is fun. Great. Will our hosts ever actually get to the real version of Star Wars as seen in the movie? Stay tuned next week.
Part 2 of our Star Wars radio drama discussion has come to an end. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, my friend.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. Check out Part 1
if you missed it.
Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.